I want to get extra serious for a minute. There is a program in Ontario called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. Basically, what it is a program where if you feel that your quality of life has dropped to a certain point where you no longer wish to continue living, or where it would be unbearable or unreasonable for you to continue living, you can choose to have a physician end your life. Now, this is mainly for people who are terminally ill. Like if you have an illness where you are going to die, like if you have a cancer that is, basically there's nothing they can do. It's going to kill you. And you want to avoid the entire, like, very painful process of dying from cancer. You can go ahead and have this, and it's a quick procedure. You take a pill, you pass out, and then you're given another drug that puts you into coma, and then another one that stops your heart. And this is a compassionate way for people to avoid unnecessary suffering, or to end suffering that is already there. And for many people with multiple sclerosis or other illnesses that degenerate the body to a point where you would reasonably think that this person would not want to continue in this kind of suffering anymore. And this is a program that is available in Ontario. And it has been very highly controversial because there has been such a very big opposition to it, feeling that this is something that should not be available, that people should not have the right to die, the right to die with dignity, say a very quiet, dignified exit, as opposed to like a very long, drawn out, painful process that would involve a lot of healthcare and a lot of what many people would consider to be embarrassing healthcare type situations, where other people are giving you like some kind of ambulatory care, cleaning up after you, etc. And some people would prefer a very quick and clean exit. And there's many people opposed to this because essentially, yes, it is suicide, but in many cases, a person is terminally ill and are going to die anyway. So what does it really matter? They're just avoiding the pain of dying from a disease that's essentially just going to rob them of their life anyway. Now, more of the controversy is surrounding people who are in a very painful situation but are going to live. Conditions, like I said, like multiple sclerosis or tardive dyskinesia, which is a very devastating illness to have. If you've ever seen someone who has tardive dyskinesia, it's a very, very terrible condition to have. You would just search that quickly on YouTube and see exactly, what it's like to have that. And some people feel that this low a level of quality of life is something that they feel that life is just not worth living, that the suffering lowers the quality of life to the point where living is not enjoyable, it's not sustainable, it's just essentially not worth living. It's just needless suffering for essentially no reason, because they're not getting anything out of life, period. And that appears to be the real main opposition, that people want to choose that instead of just staying around and suffering from their condition. And people want this law, or this right for people to die, to be repealed based on that moral position. But the real moral quagmire is still coming. On March 17, 2027, MAID will become available for people whose primary problem is mental illness. And they feel that their mental illness is at a point where they choose to die and they don't want to live anymore. And this is the very big outrage against the right to die movement, because they feel that mental illness can be cured. It's manageable. It is something that exists in your mind that can be treated with the proper healthcare, etc. But there are those who maintain, like the right to dying with dignity movement, maintain that if someone's quality of life from mental illness is bad enough and is treatment resistant and has been around long enough that it's just not going to go away, that they should have the right to die, to end their suffering. And this is the major clash here between, the right to die from a mental illness and those who feel that you shouldn't be able to end your life because of a mental illness, because there's theoretically so much that can be done about it. In many cases, there is nothing that can be done about it. And many of the testimonies of the people who want it for mental health reasons have been suffering for decades. Many of them say, and for those who have been arguing for this, have put their testimonies out there, have been suffering for 35, 40 years from various mental illnesses that are treatment resistant, that are not stopping. And they see going into old age with this kind of illness is pointless, and it's just going to continue to hurt them. So the Dying with Dignity movement or organization has a lawsuit going in order to overturn the law that says that for mental illness it's not available until 2027. They're trying to make it available right now, and that's going through the courts, as we speak. And there is the very thorny moral issue of the right to die. And me personally, I am of the opinion that you do have the right to die. If you really do feel that your quality of life is, obviously if you're already terminally ill, yeah, you can end your life to avoid the worst of what's coming if you're going to die anyway. But if the really sticky one is quality of life. If your quality of life does drop to a certain point where you feel that it's just not worth going through, it's just not worth living anymore, it's just simply too painful, and you don't get anything out of life, that you should be able to leave. I kind of am reminded of an Ayn Rand quote, and I know that sounds very, very, very strange coming from me. That she goes, I swear on my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another person. And that's kind of the way that I see it. When you're denying someone the right to die, even if it is for mental illness, you're basically telling that person you have to live for the sake of other people. Because that is the way that I see it. Those that oppose the right to die from low quality of life are not thinking about the person who wants to die. They're thinking about themselves. Because they're thinking about their own moral position. They're thinking about how they feel about the person dying, not about how the person who wants to die feels. If I'm making that clear enough. I don't know, maybe I'm not being clear enough with that. But I think you see what I mean. They're thinking about themselves and not thinking about the person who's in pain. And that it's really up to the person who's in pain to decide whether or not they want to live, and they really have that right. I mean, we're talking about serious, long-standing mental illness. We're not talking about some, teenage kid who's, just developed depression and is suicidal. Obviously, that's, no doctor is going to say, yeah, okay, go ahead and do that. Because MAID is not available for people who are underage. You have to be at least 18 years of age, and you have to have a doctor sign off on it and agree, yes, your situation is to a point that is untenable, it's not worth living, or you're going to die anyway kind of situation. So it's not like you just walk in one day and sign up. It's really up to that person, and I think that that's really the point here, that the people who are opposed to someone's right to die over a mental illness, a long-standing mental illness, not someone who, just developed it or just got it and haven't had any treatment yet, but someone who's been suffering for a long time, it's treatment resistant and is not going away. To those who oppose that right to die for mental illness, or choose to die for mental illness, I want to speak directly to them. Now, this really won't apply to my usual audience, because these criticisms won't really apply to them. You are thinking about yourselves because you don't actually care about the person that's dying. Because if you did, you'd be outraged at the situations and the policies and current social problems that lead to these problems to begin with. If you really cared that people wanted to die from mental illness and were opposed to it, then you would care about homelessness and you would demand real action over that. Because it's estimated that upwards of about 50% of the homeless population suffers from some form of mental illness. And it's a major cause of mental illness itself. A tremendous stress on a person's mind. If they really cared, they wouldn't be voting conservative and having our healthcare system systematically dismantled by Doug Ford. Or they wouldn't vote in general for any policy or politician that would dismantle a healthcare system that is systematically taking away the ability of people who have mental illness to receive help. That ability to receive help that you think that they should get instead of dying is being taken away. You would be outraged at that and demanding that be returned, or that to be increased and given to people, rather than simply denying them the right to die. Because it's easier to just take away someone's right to die than it is to fight for the services that are needed to help such people. because they don't really care about that, because that costs money. That goes into the budget. But stopping people from a right to die, that's pretty much free. And that's easy. They would care about hunger. They would care about homelessness. They would care about growing unemployment. The growing unemployment goes hand in hand with homelessness. You know, they're kind of related. Unemployment and inability to find work tends to be a major cause of people not being able to afford a place to live. And then you got Doug Ford running around saying, "Oh, everybody on unemployment, everybody on welfare just sits around watching the Flintstones on TV." Well, there's massive human suffering going on. If they really cared, they'd be demanding that those things be fixed. There'd be massive reforms there to help stop these growing problems. And there's a massive growing homelessness problem in Ontario, in the cities, where the work is supposed to be. If they really cared, they would be demanding reform there to fix this, instead of just demanding that people not be able to die. But that's not what they're thinking of. They're only thinking of their own moral outrage at people being able to choose to die. They're thinking about themselves, not thinking about the people who want to die. I hope I've made that a little bit more clear and help you understand a little bit better where I'm coming from. And that people who want to die have the right to do so. And that the state, whether that be capitalism or socialism, doesn't really have the right to force you to be alive if you don't want to be. I don't even think in socialism that you should do that. Force someone to be alive if they don't want to. Of course, in socialism, all the necessary services and help and healthcare would be there available for a person. But that wouldn't change the fact that sometimes it is treatment resistant and there's nothing you can do about it, and quality of life will still drop. And someone does have the right to exit this world if they want to, if they really feel that it's gotten to that point. So that's the point that I wanted to make. That's I guess the angle that I wanted to express. So yeah, wasn't looking to really start a conversation or anything. I just kind of really felt I needed to get that out there, because there's a lot of people that are really against the right to die, and there's a lot of misinformation that's being put out. Okay, for example, I'm hearing from Americans online saying like, "Oh, children are signing up to get MAID and dying," which is completely false. That's never happened. You cannot get MAID if you are underage. Period. And there's like stories of elderly people that are like getting, oh, this lady was getting MAID and she was getting euthanized and she didn't understand what was going on, and she was confused and she was saying what's happening to me, what's going on, and then she was euthanized. That never happened. Like there's all these horror stories of like people who died from MAID that just never happened, that are just made up. And I'm assuming this is coming from people who are anti-MAID, and it's coming from Americans quite a lot. I don't really understand why that is. I assume that's trying to just create external pressure on the Ontario government to try to get rid of the program. It's a really greaseball thing to do. It's really underhanded. It's really dishonest. It's a really despicable thing to do. If you can't openly and honestly debate an idea, at least even in Parliament, then you're basically admitting that you've already lost. So I just wanted to get that out there. I just felt I wanted to say that. I just wanted to respond to that kind of misinformation that's being put out. And I did want to respond to the people who are saying that you don't have a right to die and that you should not be able to end your life because of mental illness. And I just wanted to put my position out there and say something against those who are against people ending their lives if their quality of life drops enough because of mental illness.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.